other brothers before me. It seemed like I was awful nervous this morning. Not nervous to stand up here before you and speak anymore. God has taken that away. If you were to be around me outside of church, you would see I embarrass myself a whole lot anyway, Brother Darrell. But I would still come up before you nervous this morning about wasting opportunity today. And you know, the devil, he would move in this morning. And I'm just going to take a couple minutes and hope that maybe that I could get in a place that God would come in and that I would let him use me this morning. Because like Brother Nate this morning, I know that God is. And he's able to bless me this morning. And he is just as close to me as I'll let him in this morning. But you know, right behind that voice is the devil. And he would say, look, it's Easter. And so many people has gathered out. Look at all the little children. And look at them running around. And it takes my mind off it sometimes, is what the devil would tell you. He would say, there's too many out this morning. There's too many to focus on to really be able to enjoy church today. But you know what? When it's just a few out, that same devil, he would come right in your mind and he'd say, there's not enough out. There's no use to even trying this morning. Let's just go through the motions. But I'm telling you this morning, I don't know what brought you out here today, but there's one thing that I do know of, that I won't accept just being okay for the Lord this morning and just trying. I don't want to take my seat and just think, well, it was okay today. If there's ever something in my life worth I've given everything for, it's this man named Jesus. And it is my Lord and Savior who came in. Brother Darrell, there is something out in this land that's worth more than any home that you can live in, and worth more than any car that you can obtain. Brother, and I would hope that maybe God would come in and use me. Maybe that for 1 second you could block the noise out of your life, because I got news. God is just where you put him at today. I want to ask you, do you feel a little bit awkward being out here this morning? Is it something different to you? When you go and sit in the church house this morning, does it feel a little foreign? Guess what? It's okay this morning, because it was foreign to all of us at one time. We all felt a little bit outside at one point. Brother, and that's okay this morning. I got news. You came out this morning. You got all dressed up, and you made the effort to come out to church. Well, I'm asking you, open up your ears and hear the words that's spoken this morning. Hear the preacher, and brother, eat it up. Like that book, brother, and let it soak down in your heart. I'm not here for my own gain. I take that back. I am. I'm brother, serving the Lord is my greatest joy. It is. I don't get a payment of cash up here, but I do get a reward this morning. More than anything this world has to offer. Guess what? I speak to you of a mystery, but it doesn't have to be. I'm telling you that there is a God up in heaven who's crying out to a lost and dying world, crying out to men and women. If you would take heed this morning, he's crying out. You know, a long time ago, there was a great king. This great king Belshazzar, he began to have a great feast before him. He commanded, let's bring in all the greatest golden images, all the vessels, let's drink and eat off the best that the world had to offer. Called in all the important men and women of that time. It said as they begin to sit and eat, they begin to praise the gods of the gold, the gods of silver and wood and stone. And brother, and as they sit there, no doubt thinking, does it get any better than this? We have the finest that the world has to offer at our fingertips. he began to call for it to cease. I told everyone, go your ways. I must know what the writing is upon the wall. I can't read it, nor can I understand it.
Call the wise man.
Brethren, called every wise man that he could find.
Yeah.
Told him, I'll give you a third part of my kingdom. I'll take a gold chain and I'll place it upon the man's neck who can tell me the writing upon the wall. The best it is, I'll give to this man. No doubt, one by one, everyone wanted to read this thing. They came in far and wide trying to read, and no one could. You know, that king's mother began to walk in one time, and she said, "O king, live forever." She said, "There is one that was in your father's kingdom, brethren, who lied in understanding. Wisdom was in this man, that the very Lord walked with this man named Daniel." Brethren, and they called Daniel in. He began to ask him, tell him, he gave his great speech. "I'll give you a third part of my kingdom. I'll place a great gold necklace upon your head. I'll give you a great robe. Men will look and they'll admire at you." And I love how Daniel approached it. He looked at him and he said, "O king," he said, you can keep your gifts. Give your rewards to another. He said, but I will still read this writing to you." And he began to speak to him. He said, "O Belshazzar, your father, Nebuchadnezzar, he was a king like no other." He said, "And as a boy, you watched your father. You watched him and you seen this great kingdom that he had built." He said, "Like no one before you, no one knew who he would raise up. No one knew who he would set down, who he would kill, and who he would let live. He said, no one was like your father." He said, "But your father raised his heart up and looked upon himself, turned away from God. And God, he looked at your father and he took his very kingdom, gave it to his enemies and placed them out in the field." He said the dew of the morning was his blanket. Brethren, in the food that the animals ate, that was what his meal was. He said, until your father recognized that God up in heaven rules all things and everything is in his hands. He said, and then until when he understood it, then he gave him back his kingdom. He said, "O Belshazzar, you've seen these things, seen the wisdom of God right before you." He said, "And still you stand and you praise the God of gold and of silver, of wood and stone." These gods cannot hear you. They cannot see you, but the very God whose your life is in his hand, you do not acknowledge. He said, "You know what this writing is?" He said, "You've been weighed in the balances, brethren, and you've been found wanting. Your kingdom, it's been numbered, and it will be taken from you and given unto thine enemies." Brethren, and that king went off rejoicing, demanding, "Let's give them the gold, let's give them the titles, brethren." But guess what? I didn't hear any repentance coming out of that king. I heard the very writing, and it said he went off rejoicing just to have heard it, brethren, but yet still would not yield unto God. And just like old Daniel said, brethren, his enemies came in and he slew them right there. You know what? When I was a young boy, I was took to every church right around here. Grew up in Michigan. We went to every old regular church that they had up there. Every Sunday, I remember going to church, and I remember coming down south every summer, coming right here into Pike County, and every summer, brother, my mama and my papa, they drugged me. It would be an hour, 2 hours. It seemed like forever to us young kids. Brother, and there was no question in my mind if I was going to church on Sunday. And the only question is, how far are you going to make us go this weekend? And brother, and that was the only doubt that was in my mind, is wondering. And you know, us boys, we had them labeled just the way we wanted them. And guess what? We couldn't told you the names that were written on those buildings. But I knew if a corner store was by one, or if there was a big wide creek down next to another one. Us kids, we knew just what we liked about each one and what we could get into. You know what? And every so often I would even make it into the back of church, and I would hear the word of God, brethren, and I would be just like these young kids. Brother, and I would hear the preachers preach, and I could see the goodness of God all over me. But just like that young king, brother, and guess what? I thought I was wiser. I thought I was smarter. And about 16, growing up just outside of Detroit, brother, and I thought I was wise enough to run away from home, brother, and live on my own. And I showed myself just how wise I was. Brother Randy talked about living in sin and finding joy in it for a season. Sisters, and I found my joy for a season. Brother, but what I found is I lived in a world, brother, who my very best friends that I thought that I had, no doubt so many around us, just a bunch of runaways, we'd stay just wherever we could. Brother, you want to see what friends that I had, just drop a $20 bill in the middle of us, and I found out how close we were. Brother, and guess what? This world, it will beat you down. It will tear you up. Guess what? How many excuses do you have in your life? Where is your God? Where is His goodness? A brother just got up here 10 minutes ago and told you how he almost lost his boy. Still fighting for his life in the hospital. Come last weekend, about to meet him over at Lexington Church. Brother, and found out he had to go back home. His home burned down. Where'd you find him at this Sunday? Is he off hiding somewhere? No, he's standing before you. Still telling you the goodness of God. You want to know the realness of this world? I went and visited him in the hospital when we didn't know if his boy was going to make it. There's the sincerity of a Christian. Brother, and I seen the goodness of God. I could feel it all over me. A little girl keeps running up here and jumping in Elisha's arms. How long? When she was brought into this world, she couldn't even breathe. I didn't have any oxygen. A doctor said she'll never be normal. Brother, and I'm sitting over here having a conversation with her. Carrying on, just trying to get her to hush a little bit. Let's listen to church. Guess what? Shout on, little sister. I'm crying out for the goodness of God. God is right here before you. I got two little twins sitting over here. I never met them, but I heard of a couple babies, not as big as your hands. They said, Brother Mike, we know a couple little twins. They need your prayers. We can pray for them.
Yeah.
This world's crazy. God is all around us. I turned from Him. God, no, I got my own plans. I got my own ways. I know a little bit more than my uncles and my grandparents. Sure, I respect them, but no, they're not smart enough for me. I'm eating those words now, having 4 children of my own. I'm realizing that, guess what? That's what comes with this life. I found myself, it seemed like every which way that I turned at some point, seemed like I would step into trouble, Brother Darrell. I got news. We didn't have jobs. We weren't living the right life, so it was constant worry. Am I going to go to jail or not? Or am I going to get in this trouble or that trouble? Constant worries all the time until burdens, brother. They'll beat you down so much so that I would find myself at someone's home. Wouldn't even maybe know where I was staying at the time. I'd wait for everyone to go to sleep. I would think back when I was a child about my family. Everything that I was taught, you know what? I could run from my family, but God, He still would find me out. He would still speak to me. I couldn't escape that man. He would always cry to me and say, "What are you doing, son? What are you doing? Don't you know I have a better way?" Brother, and you know what? After so long, I'd find me a dark little corner, and I would get down and I would pray, and just being an ignorant young man, didn't know what words to say, but I poured my heart out. I said, God, it's like this. I said, if I die, I know that I'm going to go to hell. I said, but I love what I'm doing. I don't even think I'll change myself on my own. Would you send something my way? Would you just send something? You know what would change me, send it.
Yeah, come on. Preach out.
God will even get his preaching done out of ignorant people. I remember sitting in a garage with a whole bunch of my friends. Somehow the Lord came up in the conversation, and one by one, everyone began to talk about, no, I think we're okay. God, he understands us. God, he knows our hearts. We're okay. I sat there in the midst of them all. And my wife, she was there. She can even attest to it. I stood up and I looked at him and I said, listen, I know if I die right now, I'm going to go to hell. I said, and guess what? You guys are all doing the same thing I'm doing. I'm just telling you. I said, I'm just going to let you know. I know where I'm going if I leave. And guess what? I was taught about a man named Jesus. I felt the Spirit of God. I seen it. I witnessed it. And though I wouldn't submit to it, I still knew what it was.
Yeah.
There's a big difference, brother. Brother, and I would just cry like that. Lord, send something my way. You know, and just like that, I prayed, and I would pray every so often. Didn't know what it would take, but at one point in my life, I had my wife over here. She walked in, and she said, Mike, you're going to be a dad.
Yeah.
Wasn't even living in a home. Just stayed wherever I could. She walked in. Happened to be at one of my aunt's houses at that time, and brother and I, like any man, I stood up before her. I said, don't worry about a thing. I got this. I'll handle everything.
Yeah.
And I put on my big shoulders, and I stood up there, and I said, don't worry about a thing. Brother and I still remember the door closing as she walked out. She come in crying and just poured it out of worry. And I remember when that door closed, I hit my knees, and I said, Lord, Lord, I don't even know where I'm going to stay tonight. I don't even know where I'm going to lay my head upon what pillow. And God, how on earth am I going to take care of a little kid? And God, if I ever needed you, I need you right now. But do you want to know how God works today? Do you want to know the goodness of God? I cried to him and I said, Lord, I've done it this time. I don't know how many times I had got myself maybe in jail for the night or something. All those things. I looked at him and I said, Lord, I've done myself in. There ain't nothing I can do. Brother in God, he looked back at me. I said, Lord, you just tell me what to do. God, he is bigger than this world here. He'll take you what you think is your biggest problem. And I'll tell you how it works. A year or two later, I would look back at him and I said, God, how did you take my worst mistakes that I thought and turn it into the best blessings that I've ever had in my life? That's how God can work today. But guess what? He only works if you turn to him. If you seek him and you look to him this morning. Brother, and he'll take what you think is your great dilemma and he'll turn it into the best blessing that you can ever have.
Yes, he will.
That's how God can work. I told this last weekend, and I'll tell it and get out of the way. And I prayed and prayed like that. God, just send something my way. I remember coming into the church house, and my mama over here, I would just hug her, and she would begin to cry. And she would say, Mike, you don't know how many times I cried myself to sleep, talking to the Lord, saying, Lord, would you come in? Lord, I don't even know where he is. I can't even call him. Would you send something his way? Would you go and check on him for me? Brother, and she would cry like that, and I would think back, I would pray, and I'd say, Lord, just send something my way. Send something to change me, God. And do you know, I had a friend come to me one time, and he said, you want to go in the city? And you want to go get our hair cut over here? And I said, sure, let's go. And I pulled up to a little old shack, kind of a home, and on that building it said Moses' Barbershop. And brother, and I walked into this barbershop just expecting to get my hair cut. I tried to look good for the girls at that time. And brother, they had a couple benches there, and they were full of people. And I just took my seat and I began to listen to them. And brother, brethren, they begin to open up this Bible right here. They begin to speak some scriptures. And I just sat there listening. And brethren, I began to hear them. And there was a young barber there named Richard, and he looked at me always, and he said, "What you been studying on?" Brethren, and every time he said that, I just crouched down in my seat just a little bit thinking, don't you know who you're asking? What have I been studying in the Bible? Brethren, I'm out here doing all sorts of things.
Yeah.
That man knew exactly what he was doing.
Yes, he did.
He didn't want to ask the Christians what you've been studying on. Wasn't so much worried about reading to them. Every so often he would hand me a Bible, and he would say, "Well, I'm cutting hair. Would you mind reading for me a little bit?" And we would begin to read, and he'd say, "Stop." He'd say, "What do you think that means right there?"
Yeah.
And I would fumble through it, and everyone else around me, we'd all just fumble around, Papa. And he would give his, and he'd say, "Okay, keep going." Brother, and then I went back week after week, and every week he asked me, "What you been studying on?" And that man, I thought, well, I'm going to get him this time. I'm going to find me a Bible somewhere, and I'm going to pick me out a scripture, and when he asks me, I'm going to show him.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach him. Teach him how wise I can be. Homeless kids searching for a Bible somewhere. Whose house maybe would have one? Where can I find one that maybe I could just read for just a second? Pick me out something that's really going to wow everybody. And I did that very thing. And I walked into that barber, brother, and he said, just like always, "What you been studying on?" And I spouted it off real eager and real happy. And you know what? That man, he just looked and he smiled a little bit, and I know that he had to be thinking, I've even got him reading now. Even got him studying.
Yeah.
That man, I never went into a church house, but guess what? I went to church every week. Doesn't mean this building right here.
No.
It's just a place for us to meet on Sundays. Just a place for me to invite each and every one of you to say, "Come on out. Let's serve the Lord together." That's all that this is. Guess what? When I leave here and I drive to my house, guess what? My God, He's going with me. He's going to go down the road with me, and He's going to go into my home. And when my children, they come to me, and they look to me, and they say, "Dad, this is hurting. Dad, what should I do here?" Guess what? My God, He's going to be right there with me.
Yeah.
And guess what? I'm going to fumble and I'm going to stumble. But guess what? On one hand, I'm going to grab onto Him with another and say, "Lord, help me. And God, would you give me a little wisdom? Would you give me a little advice? And help me to lead them in the right way." And guess what? God, He is as close to you as you let Him today.
That's right.
And He'll be there if you allow Him in your life. I could keep going. I'm going to get out of the way and let you come on. I don't want to take any time.